Good evening and welcome, comrades, to the online Communist Forum organised by the Communist Party of Great Britain. Jack Conrad, on behalf of the Provisional Central Committee, will be leading off this evening, and afterwards there'll be plenty of time for discussion afterwards. You just need to either use the chat or ideally go to reactions and use the raise hand function if you'd like to participate. Over to you, Jack. Sorry, you're taking a swig.
No problem, Billy. Thank you very much. Okay, well, I'm going to begin as it is advertised on the can in the Weekly Worker. I'm not going to say very much. First of all, this court decision. I don't know whether I don't know whether you'd have to be a close student of French politics to have expected it. But just speaking personally, it came as utterly no surprise to me, given what's been going on in the world, not least recently. Okay, so what's it all about? I wouldn't call this a high crime. That's the first thing I would say. My understanding is that what National Rally did is set up various fronts in order to siphon off money coming from their MEPs into the coffers of the party that's operating in France. That came to, so we're told, no reason to doubt it, £3.5 million. Again, I'm going to have to be very cautious here. I would call that how should I put it, a game of paying Peter, robbing Peter to pay Paul. I know there's been some accusations about redundancy money and Christmas bonuses and stuff like that. But in reality, this isn't about, as far as I know, self-enrichment. It's about the running of a political party. And again, to my knowledge, and obviously that was legal, the Communist Party of Italy, or the Italian Communist Party, to give it its proper name, used to finance itself in good measure by taking the pay of its MPs and putting it into party control. Now, again, I don't know. Well, hopefully we've got students of Italian politics on this forum, and maybe they'll be able to inform us about the law there. But that was well known, and that's what any Communist Party would do. So we would have our MPs or MEPs on the average worker's wage, and the rest of that money would go to the control of the party. Okay, formally, I would understand it that in Brussels, Strasbourg, this money was meant to be used for the personnel, the office of these MEPs as individuals. But from our angle, we wouldn't support such a thing. It doesn't mean that we would set up elaborate front companies and do whatever the hell National Rally did. Hopefully we would be more skillful than them and make sure that we didn't break the law. But as I said, to me, this isn't a high crime. I would view it very much more along the lines of a misdemeanor. But of course, we've had the courts judging this after a long investigation. Marine Le Pen herself, my understanding is, has been fined 84,000 quid. And more to the point, she's been sentenced to jail for 4 years 2 years suspended, and 2 years with a electronic tag. But crucially, and this is what gives, I think it should be all of us concern, is that effectively what that has done is bar her from running in the 2027 presidential election. As we all know, Macron cannot run. He could run not in 2027, but after. He's young enough, but he's done his 2 terms. He has to take at least 1 term off. So we don't know what the what the candidate of the so-called centre is going to be. We can have a guess, perhaps, in terms of the left, but the left, in terms of its unity, who knows whether they would be capable of choosing a single candidate. But what I would say myself is that we at least ought to think about this, not just as a French phenomenon. So although we've flagged it as lawfare in the colours of France, and clearly it is, it isn't unique to France. And we're not just talking here about the use of the courts. What we're talking about here is the liberals, the so-called centre, using the courts, using the so-called justice system to do down their opponents. And the obvious example I'm thinking of here is Donald Trump, who, when he had his first term and didn't have Congress securely in his pocket, faced constant lawfare by the Democrats. And I've got no doubt that he lost in terms of what he would call his second term, which is the term that they robbed off him. I'm convinced that he didn't win. Either way, that war, that lawfare against him continued for 4 more years. And what did it produce? Now, it isn't automatic. I'm not saying that for a second, but we should be warned. In other words, the attempt by liberalism to save liberalism by resorting to authoritarian or draconian measures can backfire. It backfired in the United States in a pretty spectacular fashion. And I don't really see, why it shouldn't backfire in France. Now, if you look at opinion polls, I'm not saying that they should be your, be all and end all guide. But from a liberal point of view, they're sort of going, well, this is great. Because if you look at, as I say, various opinion polls, it's something like 60% of the population, when they're asked, do you approve of the courts passing their judgment on Marine Le Pen and others in National Rally, they go yes. The danger is, of course, that the 40% who say no can actually increase in size. And if we look at what's going on a global scale, that's indeed something I would say is a definite possibility, i.e., if we look at, which way the world is going, it's going to the right. We've all heard J.D. Vance in Europe, in Munich. We've heard the comments that they've made in, the US cabinet about European powers. We've heard what Trump has had to say about freedom of speech in Britain. and we've heard about the AFD, Elon Musk, but we also need to listen to what they're saying about Le Pen. Release, Marine Le Pen. Well, she isn't in prison, but you know what they mean. Okay, and showing that, how should I put it, the danger that we face. I just turned to Socialist Worker, and I turned to Socialist Worker perhaps in the expectation that my expectations would prove to be wrong. Instead, I turned to Socialist Worker and found, much to my sadness, that my expectations were confirmed. Here we have Thomas Foster reporting on the court judgment, reporting on the barring of Le Pen from the 2027 presidential race. And it says that anti-racists are celebrating. Anti-racists are celebrating this news because she's been banned from running for public office, presumably as a felon, for 5 years. That's part of her punishment. But what it says at the end is, but don't rely on the courts. What we need is to go out there and demonstrate. What we need to do is go out there and protest. Now, again, I haven't, gone to La Humanité. I haven't gone to the French left-wing press. Very easy for a monolingual like me nowadays to get a pretty good idea through Google Translate what they're saying. But I did read a report in The Guardian saying that the right, National Rally, were planning a whole series of demonstrations throughout France, in Paris, Lyon, Marseille, you name it. That's today. They no doubt are happening as I'm talking. But there were also rallies organized by the left, this is The Guardian, actually supporting the courts. Now, from what I know of Mélenchon and his organization, and what I think I know about these support the court demonstrations, I don't think that he and his organization will be supporting them. I could be wrong, but what I read of him responding to the judgment on Marine Le Pen was that we don't rely on the courts. We don't want to look to the courts. We will fight Le Pen on the streets. We will fight Le Pen, National Rally, in the ballot box. On the other hand, I could easily imagine the Socialist Party, coalition, Popular Front partner of Mélenchon. I could imagine them marching. I could imagine the Greens marching, and I can also imagine the French Communist Party also marching on such a demonstration. Now, again, if anyone knows, it would be very much worthwhile coming in terms of the discussion and informing us what has been going on and who's been saying what. Just to add to that, I suppose in the way of a bit of a how should I put it? We told you so, or be careful what you wish for. Just look at what's been going on in Britain. You know, leave aside Turkey. That's the right. Erdogan using the courts to bar his centrist opponent in Turkey. Let's just look at this police raid on Friends Meeting House in London, where comrades from what was the name of the organization? Youth Refuse, I think that's the name of it, were out yesterday supporting the Palestinian cause, their arrest, and their arrest under charges of conspiracy. Conspiracy is a real nasty law, because to conspire to do something that's against the law carries a bigger sentence than any law you would break if you went out and protested. So from my memory, because we've had comrades tried for conspiracy at least X years ago, the sentence that they were facing was an 8-year for doing something that you might get a fine for doing otherwise. All I can say to you is that thank God for the jury system. They got off. They said that, yes, this is what we did, but this is why we did it. They were able to defend themselves politically. This was in the context of a strike in Scotland, Dundee and the Timex workers. This was a watch factory. And yeah, they made a political speech. We had a good barrister, and the jury voted them, well, we know that you did what they say you did, but we support the strikers too. The danger is, of course, that once you legitimize the courts, once you actually start saying the court should interfere in politics, and I think that is what is going on, that's why we've called it lawfare, it's going to be used against you. It's going to be used against the left. So I'm reminded in this particular incident of the CPGB back in the 30s. This is the official Communist Party, where it was calling for laws, not demonstrations, not fighting them in the ballot box, but laws against the British Union of Fascists, you know, Oswald Mosley's black shirts. And the government, yes, did pass laws ostensively directed at the black shirts. And the first time these laws, Public Order Act, was used, it was used against the Communist Party. So be careful what you wish for. So I'm glad in France, from my understanding, that Mélenchon, who will definitely be a candidate, well, 2 years' time, hope he stays alive and stays fit, definitely will be a candidate in 2027. Whether he will get into the final runoff, a very different question. But I'm glad he's not supporting the courts on this occasion, because if he was viewed as a threat, the danger is that the courts would intervene in a similar fashion to bar him from standing. Okay. Having mentioned Donald Trump, of course, I have to mention Liberation Day, April the 2nd. I don't know if I'll remember that, you know, throughout the rest of my life, as Donald Trump is saying that Americans should, and the rest of us, I suppose, are meant to as well. Either way, of course, this does mark a big shift, a big turn in global politics. You know, we all know the statistics now. 34% on Chinese imports, 20% on EU imports, good old plucky UK, 10%, Vietnam, Cambodia, 46%, 49%, and we could go down the list. Yes, Russia isn't there, but not much trade, not much trade between Russia and the United States. I'm also told that Iran isn't there, but no, I mean, what we've got is a whole list of countries with swinging tariffs on their goods. If that was the be all and end all of it, yes, you could then afford to go that Trump and his administration, they're just mad. This is the line of the BBC mainstream economists. I have to say that I've heard it from my own comrades who only seem to listen, to the BBC and have how should we put it, a short attention span. The fact of the matter is, I mean, take it for whatever you will. Maybe I'm wrong. I did write about this whole question because we all knew it was coming. I wrote about it. It was originally going to be notes on the war, and instead, as I wrote, it became less and less about Ukraine and the negotiations between Russia and the United States, and it became more and more about the United States. And I thought, hell, let's just change the title of the article from Notes on the War to Notes on America. And there I made, I don't know whether this is the truth or not, but I tried to make sense of this coming, what is being called a trade war, this imposition of swingeing tariffs on a whole list of countries. As I said, we all knew it was coming. We didn't know the exact percentage points, but we'd been given fair warning way back, remember, in the presidential election campaign itself. I mean, what was Trump's word? The nicest word in the English language is tariffs. So, it was coming. The question is that there are worthwhile right-wing think tanks, right-wing thinkers who I think at least make sense of this. And we're not talking about outliers. We're talking about people who are inside the tent. We're talking about presidential advisors. And what they're talking about is, okay, we scrap the old terms of trade that has seen us have, and I'm using this in inverted commas, free trade, post 45, GATT, WTO, and all of that stuff. We get rid of that. And what we do is have a hub and spokes relationship with each trading partner. And what we do, and this is another plank of it, is perhaps, and again, I don't know whether that's actually going to happen, but we have another version of the Plaza Accord. This was way back under Reagan, and it was basically about Japan sacrificing itself in order to avoid, steep US tariff stroke sanctions, and hence we've seen Japan, go into long-term stagnation. So there's talk of a Mar-a-Lago accord after the tariffs has basically, not America's not just trading friends around, but trading opponents around. So, and there's therefore talk of categorizing the world into various colors. Those that comply with American wishes will be friends. They will be given potentially military support. But you could also come to a deal with opponents as long as they accepted the new terms of trade. And then there would be those that don't, and they could be former friends or declared opponents. Either way, the idea would be that the United States would negotiate directly to its own benefit trade terms with foreign powers. And crucially, this is where the accord comes in, try to get a situation of where the dollar was devalued, and where those who have big holdings of the dollar swap it for assets of less value, bonds that in perpetuity, or something along those lines. Now, again, I hear a lot of commentary about the end of globalization, some sort of American isolationism. I don't think that's an accurate description. My own take on it is that what is going on is America is attempting, and okay, the Republican administration is attempting to radically subordinate the rest of the world, and that includes its allies. So what is going on is something along the lines of something that Trotsky feared in the early 20s. He talked about America. It had massive food surplus. It was supplying Europe with grain. It was the creditor country. Europe was in ruins. And what Trotsky saw is the balkanization of Europe and America basically treating Europe as some sort of neo colony. Okay, we then had American isolationism. We didn't have America asserting its hegemony. The British Empire was allowed to continue until we get into World War II and the end of World War II, which definitively finished the empire effectively. America became the dominant power. But Trotsky was talking about, therefore, the American exploitation of Europe. And it's under those conditions he revived the slogan of a united Europe, but of course stressed that this Europe, this united Europe, would be under the leadership of the working class. That was the perspective. So this is reviving something that Kautsky and other comrades on the left had raised before World War I. Lenin dropped it because it was associated, that's my argument, because it was associated with Kautsky, and in the middle of World War I just said, European unity, come off it. Nonetheless, that was adopted by the Communist International. Either way, this is what at least appears to me to being what is being attempted. Now, what are the consequences? We've seen the stock exchange. I don't think that's surprising. Talk of a recession, I think, is very well founded. If we get away with not having a global recession, I would be amazed. I mean, truly amazed. I could imagine that recession also affecting the United States, and who knows what that results in terms of midterms, various sections of the capitalist class. There are so many unknowns in this situation. But what I would say is at least the attempt is being made to not only to have the rest of the world finance the United States by holding dollars, and so the United States both, is in control of the printing press, but yeah, runs a deficit in terms of trade. There's an attempt to roll back on that. There's an attempt to use mercantile economics to actually redevelop the United States industrially. Now, whether it succeeds, I just think is an open question. It's a big, big ask. But I'd also say that as well as having what you would expect is pushback from the EU, and can the EU actually get its act together to be effective under these circumstances? A big question. But what about the class struggle? What happens in China when instead of having constant increases in living standards, constant growth, remarkable historic achievement, unprecedented historic achievement. What happens when China actually has a real savage downturn? I don't know. I don't think anyone knows. I can imagine in Beijing, the leadership of the Communist Party having discussions as we speak, saying, what the hell do we do about that? We know what their initial response is, and that is tit for tat. you put 34% on our goods, we're going to put 34% on your goods. There's a huge disparity. It needs to be emphasized between what America exports to China in terms of dollars and what it imports in terms of dollars. There's bound to be a big impact on the United States in terms of consumers. You're not just going to get new factories opening up, at snap of the fingers. What happens to the price of computers, smartphones, you name it? China is the workshop of the world now. What happens when their prices go up 50% or 60%? What happens then to wage demands of workers in the United States who have to pay more in order to maintain the same living standard? I think all of these things are unknowns. All I would say, though, in terms of my expectation, and that's just a hunch, it's nothing more than that, is at the moment, my fear is that the response in the rest of the world will be orchestrated nationalism, that far from this, generating some sort of socialist consciousness, it will be a nationalist response. So, workers in Britain, will they be saying, look, what is capitalism that's the problem? Possibly some will, I'm sure, but a lot of them will be saying it's America that's a problem. Put sanctions, put tariffs on American goods. And I can imagine, again, not guaranteed, who knows, I can imagine the Communist Party, so-called Communist Party regime in China also orchestrating a nationalist response amongst its population. But all bets, I think, are open here. But as I said, I don't buy the idea of this is a different form of global capitalism. This isn't capitalism going back. There was never an autarkic capitalism, but it's not some autarky. It's not some retreat in that way. To me, what it is, it's about the assertion of American hegemony, but in a different way. I could be wrong, but that's at least how I see it. Okay, just two more items. What time have we got? 33. So I think more than halfway through in terms of this particular political report. I sort of was tempted not to talk about this particular issue, but the more I thought about it, the more I thought, well, I suppose I really ought to, because last week in my political report, I was talking about an article by Thomas Tegley Evans, the editor of Socialist Worker, and I was questioning the comrade's analysis of labourism. I think it's fundamentally flawed. Why? Because he was saying that you explain the Labour left and the Labour right, because the Labour right is loyal to the nation and the Labour left is loyal to class. I'm sorry, Comrade Thomas. I don't know what you've been looking at in terms of the Labour left, but to my knowledge, the Labour left has been loyal to the nation throughout its entire history. The Labour left believes in the nation state, bases its socialism on the nation state. And it's not just a question of looking at the Corbyn manifesto. Look at the independent Labour Party, look at the Labour left. I know throughout the 50s, but I know personally throughout the 60s into the 1970s, it was the Communist Party that acted as the intellectual leadership of the Labour left, and it sold them the alternative economic strategy as a sort of antechamber for the British road to socialism, which is what the Labour left was committed to. So I don't recognise this thing, about the Labour left not being committed to the nation. It is committed to the nation. Yes, it might use the term working class more than the right, but what the right is committed to is being a government in waiting, or a government that is acceptable to the bourgeoisie. What the role of the left is fostering the illusion that the next Labour government will be not the disaster that the last Labour government was. So the Labour left's role is to recruit militants, is to fill them with, how should I put it, hope. And then you have the inevitable that 9/10 of them then pass over to realism, because as we all supposed to know, any Labour government is better than any Tory government. The worst Labour government is better than any Tory government. I hasten to differ with that. It's not that I don't recognise lesser of evils, but I did live through the 1970s, and I was definitely very happy with Ted Heath's government that couldn't govern, that it was confronted with trade union power. It was confronted by a powerful working class, that ended with the second miners' strike. Ted Heath going to the country and saying, "Who rules? Is it the trade unions or is it your elected government?" And it wasn't the government. Again, are the laws there to be obeyed? 5 Dockers leaders deliberately got themselves arrested. They broke the Industrial Relations Act, were sent to Pentonville jail, and within days they were released because workers were going on political strike, and the TUC was forced into a position of threatening a one-day general strike unless the comrades were released. Either way, that was my criticism, one of my criticisms of his article. The other criticism of my article, especially as this was a puff piece for We Demand Better, which is clearly, or was, or is, I don't know whether it's still really going. I mean, is it really happening? But this was clearly the SWP trying to muscle in, given the stalled nature or the failed nature of this collective project carried out by former close associates of Jeremy Corbyn, new party of the left and all the rest of it, but with the intention of standing independent socialist candidates in forthcoming elections. And what our gallant editor did in his puff piece for We Demand Better is to say that the real class struggle is outside Parliament. I mean, what a dumb thing to say. So, when the German comrades got up in Parliament and opposed Bismarck's war, in France, wasn't that a form of the class struggle? When comrades got up in the Reichstag faction, second vote, and didn't vote war credits for the Kaiser's inter-imperialist slaughter against Britain and France, wasn't that a form of the class struggle? When Bolshevik deputies got up in the Tsarist Duma and read out speeches that were often prepared and written by V.I. Lenin so that they could be reproduced for Pravda, because you could say things in Parliament that if you said them openly in the press, you'd get arrested for. So they just reproduced the speech. That was legal. So the Bolshevik deputies would get up, read their speech. It would then duly be printed in Pravda, distributed, to the working class in Moscow, Petrograd, and other Russian cities. Wasn't that a form of the class struggle? I mean, come on, Comrade Thomas, of course it was. That doesn't mean we think that Parliament is the highest form of class struggle, but we think actually that it is a higher form of the class struggle than routine strikes. You know, given all things being equal, between having a revolution and economic strikes, standing in Parliament, getting MPs elected, getting them to speak and expose the government in Parliament comes somewhere near the middle. On the other hand, as was outlined by Karl Marx in The Hague, I think it was, the only Congress of the International, he attended the first International Working Men's Association that women could join. He said, well, look, in Britain, you could get a working class majority in the House of Commons, and this can act as the trigger, as the antechamber for revolutionary action in a country like Britain. He said, well, I don't really know the Netherlands. I presume he would have called it Holland, but maybe here as well. That was basically what his speech was. So is that not a real form of the class struggle? Anyway, that was my sort of rhetoric last week. So I'm sort of repeating myself, but sort of setting the scene. Well, the funny thing is when I came to write the article that I've got in this week's paper, Labourism Without Labour, I went to Thomas's article, and the words were missing. So I did a search, where's the word real? It had disappeared. One of my comrades has, because I did go to one of these archive, internet things. You can look up the FT, get past the paywall, the Daily Mail, you name it. I know how to do that, but I couldn't find the original socialist worker. The comrade, thank God, did find the original. So I wasn't imagining it because I noted down the word real. And when I went, as I said, to write my article, I couldn't damn well find it. So I haven't quoted it in the article. I simply italicized the word real and argued against it. Now, I don't mind, we do it. If there's a factual mistake, a spelling mistake, I'm dyslexic. So, if I'm writing an article, I have proofreaders. If I've introduced a whopper or even a literally spelling mistake, comrades pointed out, I'm always very grateful. So although I can be embarrassed with the print edition, I can be, my blushes can be saved for perpetuity, that people won't, in 100 years' time be saying, look at that Jack Conrad twat. He couldn't spell for a toffee. Look at that mistake, that mistake. We go and correct it. But we don't do it when it comes to political errors of that sort. We don't say, chalk and cheese, that the real class struggle isn't anything to do with Parliament. It's outside Parliament. And this is the editor we're talking about. We're not talking about a greenhorn, one would guess. We're talking about the comrade in charge of socialist worker, which leads me at least, at a point of speculation, to suggest that in the SWP, you've got a sort of Darwinian selection process going on, but of a negative sort. That what these organizations choose isn't the most thoughtful, isn't the most bold, isn't the most insightful, critical comrade to promote. It's the safest. It's the most conformist. It's always a temptation for leading comrades. I do it. If someone agrees with me, I go, oh, they must be very intelligent. But we also need to be aware that when comrades are questioning you, when they say that's not right, when they say that your formulation is wrong, that we need to recognize that we want to be replacing ourselves with precisely critical minds, people who can actually think on their feet and don't need the old generation to do their thinking for them. That doesn't mean that we discard old comrades, but I've seen it happen. I've seen it happen in official communism. I've seen how they've selected people. It's why the Young Communist League, in Great Britain, ended up with appalling leaders. I mean, just people that you wouldn't give them a job doing anything, quite frankly, in a branch, let alone at a national level. So I'm just expressing maybe here that in terms of the Socialist Workers' Party, and they've just had a generational shift. When you've got a new national secretary, Amy Leather's gone, Charlie Kimber's gone, so new national secretary, new editor of the paper, a change of personnel. But I presume what happened is that it wasn't a question of my talk to Online Communist Forum. I could be wrong, but I don't think so. I think an older comrade, I'm just making this one up, and Alex Kalinikos, maybe Charlie Kimber, who's in charge of the office. One of the older comrades looked at this formulation and said, especially as we're just about to, launch this We Demand Change initiative, this is a ridiculous article. And they went out and changed it. Anyway, I don't think myself that We Demand Change is going to get anywhere. That's obvious. Jeremy Corbyn is not going to come on board when it comes to candidates. The Green Party isn't. And again, thank you for comrades bringing these things to our attention. We've also seen the remarks on, I think it's Facebook, it could be X, I'm not sure. Either way, we've seen the remarks of, is it John? John William Rees, he has to call himself. Anyway, John Rees, leader of Counterfire, former leader, second generation leader in the SWP, basically going, I'm not coming on board this. This is premature and all the rest of it. So it doesn't look like the SWP is going to, make much mileage with this particular initiative. But I think they've actually not only not made much mileage, I think with Thomas's article, they've also made something of a hash of it. Okay, lastly, in my last few minutes, I was struck, it hasn't been widely reported. This is, and I don't know what the origin of the story is. I just read the story in The Guardian and looked, and the only other places I can find it are quite obscure, climate change websites. And even then, not many of them. Anyway, the story is of one Gunther Thallinger. I hope my German is adequate, so at least you can recognize who I'm talking about. He is the chair of the investment board of Allianz, the insurance company. And what Gunther is saying is, look, take climate change seriously. We know what Trump is saying, but hey, we know what a lot of companies are doing in terms of abandoning their commitments. We've heard, various political parties, obviously in Britain. We've got Badenoch at the moment saying that 2050, it's not doable. No, we've really got to take this seriously. Why? And he's saying, look, a world that's already 1.5, and we really are there now, aren't we? It's not that it's bedded in, but we are in a world that's now 1.5 and over. And the danger is precisely, if we look at the line of travel, it's 2%. If we look at the line of travel, it's 2.5%. If we look at the line of travel, it's 3 degrees over pre-industrial times. And what our chair of investments is saying is this makes capitalism, at least the capitalism that we now have, inoperable. That's his words. What he says is the insurance industry cannot operate in these circumstances. We're not going to give out mortgages, 20-year, 30-year mortgages. We're not going to insure houses we're not going to insure ships. We're not going to insure, public spaces, rail lines or whatever else. Yeah, airlines. We're not going to insure them because, in his words, the maths break down. In other words, the risks increase to such a degree that it becomes impossible to insure. His argument is also that nor can the capitalist state do it, that we're moving in to a situation of what he talks about is civilizational collapse. I previously quoted an actuary study. And again, that's interesting to think about why it's these particular capitalists that are issuing the warnings, talking about between 2070 and 2090 civilizational breakdown. And I've already posed the question, why is it these capitalists? It's because most of the capitalist class do not think long term. Yes, to open a car factory, maybe you have to think 5 years, 6 years, 10 years. If when you're on the stock exchange, when you're on the money markets, it will be seconds. That's why you have machine trading. Humans aren't fast enough. You have computers instead. So the more abstract capital is, the less it's able to think in terms of years, the more it's there to think in nano seconds. But there is a section of the capitalist class, actuaries, insurance, calculators, heads of Alliance and other such companies that are in business precisely to think long term. And what they're saying is, look, once you have global warming of 1.5, 2, 3, you cannot rescue a city. A city is underwater. You cannot have a situation of where we insure, houses in a floodplain. This is just impossible. When you have extreme weather, hurricanes and tornadoes, it makes it very problematic. When you have parts of the world that are uninhabitable because human beings, cannot sweat enough in order to stay alive out in the open. That's what he's talking about. Now, it's true that he quotes Trump, and when Trump talks about green scam, I have to agree with him that when it comes, for example, to carbon trading, I mean, that's a green scam. This isn't anything to do with actually stopping the release of CO2. This is a way of, virtue signaling. It's a way of governments letting themselves off the hook, saying that they fulfilled their targets. When it comes to many, not all, but when it comes to many of the tree planting initiatives, some of them are obscene, because what we have is quotas, and therefore what we have is the clearing of native woods and forests and undergrowth, and the planting of industrial monocrops, and we fulfilled our green pledges. Now, they are a scam, but the idea of global warming being a scam are clearly not the case. That what we've got is climate scientists beyond any real shadow of doubt telling us that it's real. This is what's going on. These are our expected tipping points. But we've also got that section of the capitalist class that has to think in terms of not years, but decades, also saying that. Now, in terms of our program, clearly we need to think, about what sort of world will the working class, if it gets its act together, what sort of a world will we inherit? And clearly our overriding strategic task is to preserve the conditions of human life. That has to be our top priority. But clearly that isn't going to be the work of, day one, day two of a revolutionary government. this is something that will have to be conducted over a generation or two generations or more. And the longer, and I'm not trying to preach impatience and we've got to make the revolution now, we can't, but we do need that sense of urgency of where people tell us that you can't get a communist party, that all you can do is settle for, at best, is Labourism without the Labour Party, or what you're going to have to settle for is the revolutionary sect working, in some sort of Machiavellian fashion within some broader formation and leading the working class by the nose to power. This actually helps bring about disaster. I won't live to see it, I doubt, but future generations will not thank us for our irresponsibility in not getting our act together sooner. It's going to take us time as things are. So the longer we take, the more difficult it's going to come to actually return, the world, planet that we rely on, to health. I don't see myself, our species, we can talk about science fiction, I don't see the future of our species on Venus, the moon, or Mars, or spaceships. I see it on planet Earth. This is the planet that we evolved, that we're suited for. This is our mother, and we ought to treat it with respect. I'll finish with that, Billy. Thanks.
Great, thank you. So much ground covered there. So I'm sure there's lots that people would like to say in response or in discussion. Anyone who would like to contribute, please raise your hand using the reactions function. Let me see. Renee Gimpel would like to speak. Go ahead. If you just unmute yourself first. I don't know if the comrade needs to be made a panelist or... Oh, there we are. Go ahead. You will need to unmute yourself there. Just there you are. You've done it.
Okay, thank you. I'd just like to make a few remarks on the situation in France and the condemnation for Marine Le Pen and her party. I made some notes while Jack was speaking. So the first thing to say is that the court has actually left it open, a possibility that her appeal could go through before the next presidential elections in the summer or the late spring of 2027. And it could be a good tactical move on part of the legal establishment, because if the Court of Appeal also condemns her, it would confirm that the High Court's condemnation and refusal to allow her to stand can remain. Last night, there was a poll conducted very quickly late at night by BFM TV, which is the biggest news television station in France. It's run from Paris and Monte Carlo. It's linked with Radio Monte Carlo, and they did a quick survey of voter intentions. And this is a station that's watched by more than 10 million people daily. It's probably the world's biggest news station in terms of the audience that watch it daily. And they found that in the first round, Marine Le Pen would score between 30 and 35% as of last night. But Bardella, her number two, and the person who represents the party in the National Assembly, scores very close, which could mean that if Le Pen isn't allowed to stand, Bardella might stand. But Bardella, although he's popular with the party members, is a lightweight in comparison and is not popular in the general country. By the way, the same poll showed that Mélenchon would get 10% in the first round, which is not very good for moving on to the second round. However, in the second round, according to this poll last night, the presidential party as it is now would come ahead, but we don't know who the candidate is going to be. But that means a centre or centre-right party member would gather all the other votes and would defeat once again the National Rally. So that's my first remark. My second remark for me is it seems to be a tradition, especially on the right in France, going back to Jacques Chirac and his Prime Minister Alain Juppé were also condemned by the court. Chirac only escaped a prison sentence because he was too old at the time. And this was for fraud, manipulation, stuffing people into positions of use to the party, but they were not actually officially supposed to be there. Then we come, of course, to Sarkozy and his Prime Minister, François Fillon. So Sarkozy is serving a house arrest sentence at the moment for fraud. And François Fillon, you may remember, just before the last elections, so the presidential elections, he was the great hope of the right. And he, like Marine Le Pen, had made great declamations against all the corruption in French